Hey guys, so here's a quick video about how to use cats to do example-driven widget invocation. So we're going to make just a very simple, very basic blog post widget, something that'll style a blog post. So I've started out with this. I've created a demo directory. It doesn't have anything in it. I'm going to type Python -m simple HTTP server to boot up a little web server. And I'm going to add a file, and we're going to call this mockup.html. And so every widget in Cats, every page in Cats, starts with one of these design mockups. So let's just make this little web page and verify that we can see the web page. Okay, so a mockup is the design that you eventually want to see. So let's make just a very simple blog post, and specifically when we make Cats widgets, there's this kind of double wrapper strategy that we want to pursue, and this will make a little bit more sense later. But we'll start out with div id equals post widget. So this is the outer wrapper. This is saying, you know, inside here is a blog post widget. Let me close this in the body tag. All right, and then we'll just put a div in here to wrap everything inside of it. All right, so this right here is where your widget implementation goes. All right, so let's say maybe our blog post has a title. So let's wrap that in h1, title, and let's say maybe it also has a body. So this is a pretty simple design, obviously. But we can already see how this is basically like just a simple HTML design document that shows how something might look. And you could add arbitrarily complex CSS or HTML to this. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is go create an example web page that uses that mockup. So let's say we're going to say example.html. And here, sorry, I can't type and talk at the same time. Okay, so this might be an example of somebody out on the web who's blogging or who wants to invoke your design or widget. And this guy out on the web has a blog post. So we'll say div class equals blog post. Maybe he's marked it up with a class. And he has a title. So maybe how to make a Cats widget. And then he has some text in this blog post. Just follow these steps. So again, we're not particularly styling this very much, but you can see how here's our mockup, and then here's our example document, and it's clear that these have different styles. Okay, so now here's the reason we're doing all of this, is we want to take the mockup and apply the design in the mockup to this example document. And to do that, we're going to create a tree sheet. So we'll add one more file. We'll call this widget.cats. Widget is in mockup or perhaps poor naming conventions. And the first thing we're going to do in this tree sheet is name the existence of this design document, this mockup tree. So every Cats document has two sections. So there's a header section and then there's a body section. And in the header section, we state the existence of different files on the web we're interested in. And then in the body section, we relate those files to each other. So the header section has these at rules. So this basically says there's this thing, it's an HTML tree. We're going to give it a name, so I'll call it widget. And then we're going to give it a URL to point at it. So this URL is relative to the tree sheet. So we're going to say relative mockup.html. And that just says go look for a document called mockup.html in the path relative to wherever this file is being loaded from. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is start writing Cats relations that relate this mockup document to something in here in this example document. So the first thing we want to do is say, come up with a CSS convention, like a class-based convention, for example. So we might say, okay, well, we want our invoker to maybe have this blog post class on every blog post, and maybe we'll have them have a title class on every blog post title, and maybe a body class on every blog post body. And this is an activity that is a part of the design of your widget. But the result is you'll have this CSS class-based microschema. So here I'm going to copy just these three classes, blog post, title, and body, and I'm going to paste them into here as a reminder for the three pieces of this schema that we're going to need to address. So we need to address the blog post as a whole, the title, and the body. Okay. So we're going to start writing cats rules to address these three things. Okay, so the first is the blog post. So let's put this up here. So we're going to say that the thing with the CSS selector blog post should be grafted. So graft, you can think of it as like a widget invocation onto this post widget. And so this is where this wrapper comes in. So the outer wrapper is the container for the contents, and this set of contents right here is what we want to graft onto, but we reference this outer container. So post widget right here is the outer container. So we say post widget, but we can't just say post widget. This is a CSS selector. We need to say which document it's in. And so we're going to say this is in the widget document. Remember, we named that up here in the header. It's an HTML file. It's at mockup.html. It's called widget. So widget pipe post widget says the CSS selector post widget in the document with the name widget. This right here, blog post on the left, doesn't have a document name, and so the default is whatever the current loaded page is. So let's actually, before we do anything else, let's just load this and see what happens if we try to load the example page with this tree sheet. So I'm going to refresh the example page, nothing happens. The reason is we haven't actually loaded the cats library. So I'm going to type script source equals treesheets.org/release/cats 0.7.js, and then I'm going to load the tree sheet. So link rel equals tree sheet, href equals widget.cats. All right, so now if I load the example page, what do we see? Well, we actually see the same thing. Let me go back to the mockup page. Oops. We see the same thing as the mockup page. So here's the mockup page right here. Here's the example page right here. So having loaded this tree sheet so far, what we've basically done is we've replaced all of this example HTML with the mockup HTML. And the reason is because of this one command right here, GRAFT. So what we essentially did was punched out one thing with the other. So remember, we want to also take care of these slots in here. So we need to write more cats rules so that we don't just replace one with the other, but that we selectively replace bits and pieces of one with the other. Okay, so here's a little quirk of the current implementation. This is a need to know, but it's unfortunate because it'll go away once we clean up the implementation a bit. But underneath a graft in the DOM, we need to reverse the order in which we write the cats rules just because of a lazy hack in the implementation. And so when we talk about title and body, instead of relating things on this left-hand side from the invoking page into the widget, we're going to reverse it. And so here we're going to say the widget, and then we're going to go find the title in the widget. So this is the h1 element. So we'll say h1, oops. And then is another relation type. And then we need to figure out what this is in the example page. And remember, it's this class title thing right there. So I'll copy that. Is title. Okay, so let's delete this string down here and let's reload the page with just that. Okay, so far we've seen that we replaced the whole thing outright, and now we've replaced the entire thing, but we've punched in the title from the example page. And of course we can do the same thing with the body. So here's the body in the example page. We'll replace that. And then this is the section selector in the mockup. Okay, and let me see if I can align these so that it makes a little bit more sense. Okay, there we go. And now, when we load the example page, we see the same data. So we see the how to make a cats widget, that was the title, and just follow these steps, that was the body. But we see it in the style of this mockup here. So because both were text, let's maybe add a little bit of CSS to make it a little bit more apparent, and this will also show you how to rope CSS into the mix. So let's create a file, an example.css. and let's go look at the mockup. So let's say that let's say this is class equals blog post impl. Okay, where's our CSS file? So let's say that blog post impl h1s have a background color of, oh, I don't know, RGBA. Is this 0 to 255? 255, 255, 200, 0.5. All right. So we've created the CSS file. We can actually reference this from the tree sheet as well. So just as we can create a HTML reference up in the head, we can create a CSS reference. In this case, we don't need to name it. In fact, we can't name it. Did we call this example.css? We did. Example.css. It's also a relative link. And now when we load this, oh, that was yellow, it turns out. Okay, so we see this. Let me change it to a different color so it's more apparent on video. There we go. So now we have this nice orange color behind the title. Let's see if we remove from example this tree sheet link. So we're removing the cats link. This is the original file, remember. This is what you wrote. It's just these two divs wrapped in this blog post class. But with the tree sheet, it gets projected into this. Okay, so let's look at one more thing we might do, and that's use an R relation to relate a list of things. So let's say maybe we have a list of tags. So let's say we have div class equals tags / div, and then span, oh, I don't know, web development, span tree sheets, span design, span. So these are the three tags maybe for our blog post. Okay, so if I load the page right now, having added these tags, nothing's going to happen. The reason nothing's going to happen is because there's no spot in the mockup to put these tags. And if I remove the tree sheet link, just to show you again, we see here's the title, how to make a cats widget, here are the three tags, it's just span with no design applied to them, and then here's the body. Okay, so let's add back the tree sheet link, let's reload the web page, and now let's add a place in the, what do you call it, in the mockup. Okay, so let's make a UL, and then an LI, tag 1, tag 2. So let's reload this. So we see tag 1, tag 2, title. Let's make this below the title. That doesn't make a lot of sense there. There we go. Okay, so how to make a cats widget, tag 1, tag 2, just follow these steps. And now we need to map the data into this mockup value right here, tag 1 and tag 2. Okay, so let's go back to the tree sheet. And we're going to use what's called an R relation. So GRAFT you can think of as widget invocation, is you can think of as like a print statement or kind of mapping a one-to-one thing. And the R relation is mapping a list to a list. So we say widget, and that was the UL, R, and then remember that was the tags class in the example, this tag. So we're saying this list of things right here is the same list of things as that list of things. That's what the R statement says. And then inside of that, we're going to say an is statement. So we're going to say widget li is dot tag. And remember, li in the mockup are these right here. So we're going to say those guys, one per one, are these guys, one per one. And here, we just said dot tag. It looks like in the example that doesn't actually exist. There's no tag class that we used. So just to show you a little bit of variety in the CSS selectors, instead of adding that class, maybe we would say tag span. So this is a CSS selector saying any span element directly beneath the element with the class tags. Okay, so we reload our example over here, and now we see the title, how to make a cats widget. We see the three tags projected into this UL, and then we see the body, just follow these steps. Okay, so let's go back to the mockup and look at what that looks like. The mockup, we didn't include the head, the what do you call it? The style sheet. Link rel equals style sheet. Href equals widget. Oops, example. CSS. There we go. Okay. So here's the mockup, and here's the example invocation of that mockup. And the idea here is that this mockup is just HTML. So this is a terrible design, obviously, in terms of its visual aesthetics that we've created. But the point is we can layer in arbitrary structure, arbitrary styling, arbitrary CSS. We can put JavaScript in this thing, and we can edit it just as a regular mockup document. And this, the invoking of this mockup, is done entirely through linking to one of these tree sheets in the head. So again, I'm going to remove this link from the head and reload this, and all we've done here is taken very simple HTML that we can also write using any method that we want, using a WYSIWYG editor by hand. And then by linking it to one of these tree sheets, we can project it into this design space. And for any different tree sheet that uses the same set of CSS classes, we can then transfer widget to widget. So maybe a set of blog themes could all use the same convention of CSS tags, and then we could project this into different design spaces. Here is, I'll make this a little bit bigger. Here are the rules that we created to do this, and I'll just run through these one more time. So a tree sheet is divided into two pieces. So this is the head up here, and then this is the body down here. In the head, we declare the existence of files we're interested in talking about. So here we just said there's this HTML file, we named it widget, and we said it's located in this mockup.html file relative to the tree sheet. This could have also been a URL. So this could have been, http:// We also said, hey, while you're at it, include the CSS file. And there's really no reason why we need to be able to do this. The invoker could easily just add the CSS link themselves, but this is an easy way to package everything up into one tree sheet. Okay, and then we implemented the body. The body consists of a couple relations. Here you saw the GRAFT relation, and the is relation, and the are relation. And here we had one GRAFT relation around the widget as a whole, and then we had a set of relations within it that mapped piece for piece how different elements of that mockup, that widget, map onto your data. Because of an implementation quirk, remember that we had to switch the ordering in which we did this, and this is just a quirk of the implementation right now, but you'll need to do this for it to work. So when you do these grafts, you need to graft. The left-hand side is the invoker page, and the right-hand side is the widget page. And then everything beneath a graft, beneath not in the sense of the order of the rules in the tree sheet, but in the sense of the containment relationship inside the widget. Everything on the left-hand side is then the widget. Everything on the right-hand side is on the invoker page. And then these, on the left-hand side and on the right-hand side, these are just CSS selectors, and in the middle, these are just CSS rules right here. And then one final design element to point out. In this mockup page, we use this kind of double wrapping style, where we had this outer wrapper. This outer wrapper is what we grafted onto. Then we had this inner wrapper, and this inner wrapper is the container as it will be projected into the invokers page. And so that's a good pattern to follow whenever you're doing widgets with cats. So that's a simple example. I'll post this to the Tree Sheets website. Hopefully this will get you started developing some basic things.